Have you ever felt as if the very ground beneath your life was disappearing? As if every answer you once trusted had turned to silence? In those moments, you may wonder if you are broken, if you have lost your way forever. But what if this emptiness is not the end, but the beginning? What if the collapse of certainty is the doorway into a truth deeper than anything the mind can hold? Across centuries, seekers have called this passage the dark night of the soul, a tunnel of doubt and despair that secretly hides the light of awakening. In this video, we will enter that mystery together and discover how silence, loss, and even suffering can lead to freedom, compassion, and peace. When the dark night of the soul begins, it rarely announces itself with clarity. It often arrives quietly, hidden in ordinary moments, and yet its weight begins to grow until it cannot be ignored. You may find yourself sitting in your room, surrounded by everything familiar, and still feel like a stranger to your own life. You may notice that the routines that once gave you comfort now feel empty, and the ambitions that once pushed you forward no longer carry meaning. This is the first sign of the passage. It is the collapse of the old certainty. The beginning of a dismantling that can feel terrifying, but is in truth a sacred invitation. At first the mind resists. It wants to return to the familiar answers. It says, if I can just get back to work, if I can just find comfort in my relationships, if I can just restore the feelings I used to have, then everything will be okay. But the night does not allow this. It strips away the illusions one by one, leaving you face to face with emptiness. The ego calls this emptiness failure, but the soul knows it as purification. It is the clearing of ground so that new life can grow. Different traditions have described this stage in different ways, but the essence remains the same. In Christian mysticism, it is the silence of God, the absence of all comfort, a stripping away that forces love to stand without reward. In Buddhism, it is the great doubt, when every concept dissolves and the mind can no longer hold to any answer. In Hindu philosophy, it is vairagya, the detachment from desires and roles that once seemed so important. Each path points to the same truth. The night is not punishment. It is transformation. This transformation often begins with loss. You may lose a sense of purpose or the energy to chase after goals. You may lose relationships that once felt central. You may even lose the comfort of spiritual practice as prayer feels dry and meditation feels restless. At first, these losses feel unbearable, but slowly you realize they are teaching you something. They are showing you that your identity was built on shifting ground. They are showing you that nothing external can define you. They are guiding you back to the one thing that cannot be taken away, awareness itself. Awareness is the silent witness that has been with you through every joy and sorrow, through every triumph and loss. Even in despair, it remains unbroken. But in ordinary life, awareness is often hidden behind noise, the constant chatter of thoughts, the endless pursuit of desires, the restless search for meaning. The dark night removes these distractions, not to punish you, but to reveal what has always been here. The emptiness you feel is not the absence of meaning. It is the space in which true meaning can be discovered. In the middle of this passage, Practices can feel different. Meditation may not bring comfort, but it teaches you to sit in silence without escaping. Breath practices may not give instant peace, but they ground you in the body, reminding you that presence is still possible. Loving kindness meditation softens the voice of judgment, whispering, "May I be free, may I be safe, may I find peace," even when the mind insists you are lost. Mantras or prayers may feel empty, but they anchor you, giving the restless mind a rhythm to follow. These practices are not solutions, they are companions, steady lights in the tunnel, helping you walk when you cannot yet see the end. As you stay present, subtle shifts begin to happen. A moment of silence feels less frightening and more alive. A breath feels steady even when the mind is chaotic. A small glimpse of peace arises, not from effort, but from surrender. These glimpses are the first signs of transformation. They remind you that even in the deepest darkness, awareness remains untouched. You begin to trust that the night has purpose, that it is guiding you towards something greater. Slowly, compassion begins to grow. When you see your own suffering so clearly, you cannot help but notice the suffering of others. The dark night humbles you, softens you, and opens your heart. You realize that every person you meet is carrying their own weight, their own doubt, their own silence. Instead of judgment, you feel tenderness. Instead of distance, you feel connection. This compassion does not need to be forced. It arises naturally as the heart learns to stay open even in the middle of pain. Another fruit of this stage is resilience. When you discover that you can sit with emptiness without being destroyed, fear begins to lose its grip. You learn that storms pass. You learn that even despair has an end. You learn that awareness is larger than any thought or feeling. This resilience gives you courage, not the courage of pride, but the courage of surrender. You walk forward, even without knowing the outcome, because you trust that awareness will hold you. And so, the dark night of the soul is not simply a collapse. It is the beginning of a rebirth. The emptiness you feel is the space being cleared for new life. The silence you hear is the doorway to a deeper voice. The loss you endure is the breaking of illusions, so that truth can shine. At first, the process feels unbearable, but with time, you see that it is sacred. You see that it is the same passage walked by saints, mystics, and seekers across centuries. You see that you are not alone. In this first stage, the most important lesson is surrender. Not resignation, not giving up, but the willingness to be with what is, without running away. Surrender is the key that opens the night. It allows the process to unfold. It allows awareness to shine. It allows the transformation to take root. When you surrender, you discover that the night is not against you. It is for you. It is guiding you back to the truth of who you are. As the dark night deepens, the second stage of the journey begins to take shape. It is no longer just about the loss of old certainties. It is about the discovery of what remains when all those certainties are gone. This stage is the turning point, where despair begins to soften into recognition and silence begins to reveal its hidden fullness. At first, it may come in glimpses, small moments when the storm quiets and you sense something steady beneath the chaos. These glimpses are precious because they point to the truth of who you are, a truth that was always present, even when you could not see it. The key to this stage is awareness. Awareness is not a thing you create, it is what has always been here, watching, holding, and witnessing every experience you have ever had. It was present in your happiest days and in your darkest nights. It was present in childhood, in adulthood, in every breath you have ever taken. You may not have noticed it because it is so ordinary, so close that the mind overlooks it. But when the illusions of the ego collapse, awareness is revealed, steady and unbroken. Imagine sitting quietly, watching your thoughts. You see them rise and fall, one after another, like waves on the surface of the ocean. Some thoughts are pleasant, others painful, but all of them pass. Then imagine watching your emotions. Joy comes, then fades. Fear rises, then falls. Sadness lingers, then softens. Each emotion feels powerful in the moment, but none of them lasts forever. What remains through it all? The awareness that sees. That awareness is you, not the small self, not the story you tell about who you are, but the pure presence that holds everything. This realization is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because you see how small the ego's world really is. All the striving, all the clinging, all the desperate attempts to secure permanence are shown to be illusions. Liberating because you discover that beyond the ego there is something vast, timeless, and free. You realize that you are not the storm, you are the sky in which the storm unfolds. You are not the story. You are the awareness that holds the story. The traditions point to this truth in many ways. In Zen, it is the simple act of sitting, letting thoughts and feelings come and go without clinging. In Hindu self-inquiry, it is the question, who am I? Followed all the way back to the source until nothing remains but pure consciousness. In Christianity, it is the recognition that when everything else fails, when even the sweetness of prayer disappears, the soul still rests in God's presence. Different language, but the same truth. The dark night clears the illusions so that awareness can be seen. At first, resting in awareness feels like effort. You may need to remind yourself again and again that thoughts are not who you are. You may need to return to the breath, to the body, to the present moment. But slowly, something shifts. Awareness begins to reveal itself, not as something you visit, but as what you already are. You see that you do not have to hold awareness, because awareness is what holds you. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. As you rest more deeply in awareness, new qualities emerge. Peace begins to grow, not as the absence of problems, but as the presence of stillness within them. You may face the same challenges, but you face them differently. You are less reactive, less shaken, because you know there is a ground beneath the surface. Joy arises, not from external events, but from the simple fact of being. You feel joy in a breath. in a moment of silence, in the warmth of sunlight, in the sound of rain. This joy is not fragile because it does not depend on anything outside of you. Compassion also begins to expand. When you see that awareness is not limited to you alone, but is the same awareness in everyone, you feel connected. The boundaries of ego soften. You realize that the suffering of others is not separate from your own. Their joy is not separate from yours. This recognition opens the heart in a way that cannot be forced. It flows naturally because you have touched the unity that underlies all beings. Clarity arises as well. When you are no longer lost in the storm of thoughts, you can see more clearly. Decisions feel simpler because you trust the guidance of awareness. Intuition speaks more loudly because the noise of ego has quieted. Creativity flows more easily because it is no longer blocked by fear. You discover that life itself is intelligent, that awareness guides you if you allow it. Of course, the ego does not disappear entirely. It returns again and again, trying to pull you back into old habits of fear, doubt, and striving. Sometimes you will still believe it. Sometimes the suffering will return. But now you have a new perspective. You know that awareness remains even when you forget it. You know that peace is still here even when the mind is restless. You know that the night is not endless, that dawn always comes. This knowing gives you strength to keep walking. This second stage of the dark night teaches one of the most important lessons. You are not what you thought you were. You are not just a name, a role, or a collection of memories. You are awareness itself, timeless, infinite, unbroken. The ego may resist this truth, but once you have glimpsed it, you cannot forget it. It changes the way you live, the way you love, the way you see the world, and it prepares you for the next stage of transformation, when suffering itself becomes not just something to endure, but something that reveals deeper wisdom. Once awareness begins to reveal itself as the steady ground beneath all experience, a new lesson emerges, and it is one that reshapes your relationship with suffering itself. At first, suffering felt like an enemy, a heavy weight pressing you down, something to resist and escape. But in this deeper stage of the dark night of the soul, you begin to see suffering as a teacher, perhaps even as a friend. It is no longer simply a burden. It becomes the fire that burns away illusions, the chisel that shapes the stone, the mirror that reflects what is still hidden within you. When you sit with your pain instead of running, you begin to notice that it carries wisdom. Fear reveals the places where you still cling to control. Anger reveals the wounds you have not yet healed. Grief reveals the depth of your love and how much you long for connection. Doubt reveals the fragile structures of meaning that were built by the ego. Each form of suffering, when observed with awareness, shows you something about yourself and something about life. It is not pleasant, but it is sacred. This perspective changes how you live. Instead of numbing yourself with distraction, you turn toward your experience. Instead of condemning your pain, you allow it to move through you. Instead of seeing yourself as broken, you begin to see yourself as in process, being shaped, being refined. The dark night does not end suffering instantly, but it teaches you how to hold suffering differently. It teaches you to rest in awareness even while the storm rages. Traditions across the world echo this wisdom. Buddhism speaks of the Four Noble Truths, beginning with the recognition that life includes suffering, but instead of despair, the teaching invites us to use suffering as the doorway to liberation. Hinduism speaks of vairagya, the art of detachment, which allows us to face pleasure and pain with equal steadiness. In Christianity, the cross itself is the symbol of transformation, where suffering becomes the path to resurrection. These are not abstract ideas. They are reminders that suffering can be the very soil in which awakening grows. During this stage, specific practices become invaluable. Insight meditation teaches you to observe sensations without reacting. You notice the tightness in your chest, the restlessness in your thoughts, the heaviness in your body, and you realize that all of it changes moment by moment. Loving kindness meditation softens the inner critic, replacing judgment with gentleness. You repeat silently, "May I be free, may I be safe, may I live with ease," and something in you begins to open. Breath practices calm the nervous system, giving you the stability to stay present. Chanting or prayer connects you to the countless others who have walked this same path, reminding you that you are never alone. Through these practices, suffering begins to lose its sharpness. It is not that pain disappears. It is that you learn how to meet it. Acceptance arises, not as resignation, but as openness. You allow life to be what it is, without constantly demanding that it be different. This acceptance softens resistance. And resistance is what made the suffering heavier. In this way, acceptance transforms the experience. It turns pain into presence, despair into insight, and emptiness into openness. As acceptance deepens, compassion flows more freely. When you recognize how deeply you have suffered, you understand the suffering of others without judgment. You see their struggles as reflections of your own. You no longer need to harden yourself against them. You meet them with tenderness, with patience, with care. This compassion is not sentimental. It is steady. It gives you the strength to stay present with others, even when they're in pain. It becomes a natural extension of the awareness you have discovered. Resilience is another fruit of this stage. Once you realize that you can hold suffering without being destroyed, fear begins to dissolve. You know storms will come, but you also know they will pass. Pain will visit, but you also know it does not define you. You discover a strength that is not based on control, but on surrender. You face life with openness because you trust that awareness can hold it all. This resilience makes you courageous, not because you are invulnerable, but because you know you are unbreakable at the core. Creativity also blossoms in unexpected ways. When the ego is no longer consumed by fear and defense, energy is freed, inspiration begins to flow. You may feel drawn to express what you're learning through writing, art, music, or simply the way you live your daily life. This creativity is not about recognition. It is about expression, the natural overflow of awareness. It is healing, both for you and for those who experience it. Perhaps the greatest lesson suffering teaches in this stage is humility. Before the dark night, the ego believed it could control life. that it could build permanence, that it could secure meaning. After the dark night, you realize how vast the unknown really are in. You bow to the mystery. You recognize that you cannot hold life in your hands, but you can live it with openness. This humility is not weakness. It is wisdom. It allows you to walk lightly, to live with wonder, to embrace life as a island. And so suffering becomes a path. It is no longer only a weight to carry. It is a teacher, shaping you, refining you, guiding you back to awareness. The dark night of the soul does not end suffering completely, but it changes your relationship to it forever. Once you see suffering as a teacher, you no longer run from it. You allow it. You learn from it. You grow through it. And in this way, suffering becomes the very ground of awakening, the soil from which compassion, resilience, and wisdom continue to grow. As the journey through the dark night of the soul reaches its final stage, the transformation becomes clear. What began as despair, as loss, as silence, now reveals itself as wholeness, peace, and fulfillment. You realize that the night was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to strip away what was false, so that what is true could shine. It was meant to dismantle the fragile structures of ego, so that awareness itself could be recognized as your true home. And now, as the light begins to rise at the end of the tunnel, you see that the journey has carried you into a new way of living. The peace you now experience is unlike anything you knew before. It is not the fragile calm that comes when problems are absent. It is the steady stillness that remains even in the middle of challenges. You feel it when you wake in the morning and notice that the silence inside no longer frightens you. You feel it when difficulties arise and instead of panic, you meet them with steadiness. This peace is not something you create. It is what you are. It was always here, hidden beneath the noise of ego, waiting to be uncovered. Alongside peace comes joy. Not the fleeting joy of pleasure or accomplishment, but the quiet joy of being itself. You feel joy in the breath, in the warmth of sunlight, in the sound of rain. You feel joy in the ordinary, because the ordinary has become extraordinary. This joy is not loud. It is gentle, steady, unshakable. It does not depend on circumstances. It flows naturally, because it rises from awareness itself. Compassion deepens as well. Having walked through your own darkness, you cannot help but see the struggles of others with new eyes. Their pain is not separate from yours. Their doubts are not separate from yours. You recognize that the same awareness that carries you carries them. Compassion flows naturally, not as obligation, but as love. You find yourself more patient, more tender, more willing to serve. This compassion transforms your relationships. It creates connection where once there was distance. It creates unity where once there was separation. Clarity also shines more brightly in this stage. The illusions of ego no longer dominate your vision. You see that thoughts are just thoughts, that emotions are just emotions, that circumstances are just circumstances. None of them define you. This clarity frees you from fear. It frees you from clinging. It allows you to live more lightly, more simply, more authentically. Decisions feel easier not because life is without challenge, but because you trust awareness to guide you. Intuition grows stronger. Creativity flows more freely. Life feels like a dance, not a struggle. Resilience has become second nature. Having endured the night, you know storms will come, but you no longer fear them. Pain will visit, but you also know it will pass. You know the cycles of life will rise and fall, but awareness will remain. This resilience gives you courage. You no longer cling to control because you trust the flow of existence. You walk with openness because you know that nothing can truly harm what you are. Wholeness is perhaps the greatest gift of this final stage. For so long, you lived with the feeling that something was missing, that you had to chase after meaning, after recognition, after fulfillment. The dark night stripped all of that away, and in the emptiness, you discovered that nothing was missing. You were always whole. You were always complete. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means the recognition that awareness itself is enough. It means resting in the truth that you are not broken, that you are not lacking, that you are the infinite presence in which all experience arises and passes. This wholeness changes how you live. You no longer live in constant striving. You no longer chase endlessly after what you think will complete you. You live more simply, more authentically, more fully. You find beauty in small moments because every moment is seen as sacred. You give more freely because you no longer fear loss. You love more deeply because you no longer fear vulnerability. You serve more naturally because you see that serving others is the same as serving yourself. And yet, even in this final stage, challenges may still come. The ego may still whisper its doubts. Darkness may still return in new forms. But now, you walk differently. You walk with peace, with joy, with compassion, with clarity, with resilience. You know that awareness remains, no matter what. And this knowing gives you strength to face anything. So, what is the light at the end of the tunnel? It is not a prize waiting outside of you. It is the recognition of what you already are. It is the awareness that has always been here, timeless, infinite, unshakable. The dark night did not create this light. It only removed the layers that kept you from seeing it. The light is you. It always was. This is the resolution of the dark night of the soul. Not the end of suffering forever, not the promise of a life without challenge, but the recognition that even in the midst of suffering, you are free. Even in the midst of darkness, you are whole. Even in the midst of change, you are eternal. And once you see this, once you taste this truth, no night can ever take it away. If these words have resonated with you, if they have helped you see your own struggles in a new light, I invite you to stay with this journey. Share your reflections in the comments because your story